أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله الذي لا يبلغ مدحته القائلون ولا يحصي نعماءه العادون ولا يؤدي حقه المجتحدون الذي لا يدركه بعد الحمم ولا يناله غوص الفطن ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين حبيب قلوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا والشفيع ذنوبنا سيدنا ومولانا أبي القاسم محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين صاحب العصر والزمان خليفة الرحمن إمام الإنس والجان ولعن الله وعداهم أجمعين إلى يوم الدين أما بعد فقد قال الله وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ولا تكونوا كالذين نسوا الله فأنساهم أنفسهم أولئك هم الفاسقون صلوا على محمد وآل محمد
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Our discussion has been revolving around the revival of the soul. And tonight is our final lecture in this mini-series. I want to thank the Northwestern Shia Youth Group and all of you who put forth the efforts to make this program possible. I've enjoyed my stay here, as always, in Seattle, and those of you who are responsible for my accommodations and for flying me in, you guys went above and beyond as usual to make me feel very, very comfortable. I mean, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless all of you for your efforts, inshallah. For your tawfiq and for your health, inshallah, one salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Our attempt since day number 1 has been around the fact that we need to go through a revival process. That we live in an era where there are signs all around us, and I mentioned and have been mentioning for the past 2 nights that we become obsessed with these signs. And we become somebody who is connected to those things outside of us and have in the process forgotten about us inside of us. And the arrival of the Imam and the preparation for the arrival of the Imam, which seems to be imminent given the fact of what's happening around the world right now, requires us to first look within. And it has to be an inside-out process. Right now, a lot of us are doing an outside-in process. We have solutions for people all over the world. We have solutions for the people next to us. We have solutions for families, communities, youth out there who might not be on the track of Islam. But when it comes to our own development, we're lost. And that's the problem that we had presented to you 2 nights ago. And yesterday we talked a little bit about the first immediate effect of this problem that we have, of us becoming complacent, of us ignoring the most important person in our life being us. The immediate impact is what? That we fall into the disease of ghafla. We become somebody who becomes heedless, giving no importance to those things that requires every ounce of our attention. We talked about the fact that sometimes in our development there are blockages, there are hurdles, there are speed bumps, there's cracks in the sidewalk that block us from progressing forward. And part of that is from inside of us. So tonight, given the fact that I promised you guys that we'll discuss a solution to this problem, and we will. If I had more time, there's at least 4 or 5 solutions, but one for tonight is enough. And that solution is for you to understand your own value. is for you to look at yourself through the eyes of your Creator, not through your own eyes. The problem is that we go into the battle having convinced ourselves that we're going to lose the battle. When Amir al-Mu'mineen is preparing his soldiers for battle, he says a very beautiful thing to them. He says, as you face the army of your enemy, and the way the Arabs used to fight back then initially was that our best three will fight your best three. And we'll go row by row by row. That was the etiquette of war back then. That's why if you look at the savagery on the day of Ashura, that of course didn't happen. There was no row by row by row. They would surround those who fought for Hussein. And so Imam Ali would tell his army that, look, when you get to the front line and you are now opposing the best three that your enemy has, look at them as if they don't exist in your eyes. And focus on the last guys, because the way that they would position their army is the strongest would be in the front and the weakest would be in the back. Meaning what? He would say, look at them as if they're nothing, man, they're gone, they're not even here. You look at the weakest guys. You conquer them, you conquer the army. Meaning what? He was preparing the mindset going into the battle. Our mindset sometimes, when we talk about reviving the soul, we talk about bettering ourselves, we talk about cleansing ourselves, we talk about teaching ourselves, all these things that we talk about, Islah, reform, Islah, all these things we talk about. Yes, there's an element that tells ourselves that, yeah, I want to be better, I can be better, I should be better. But right after that, there seems to be a voice inside of us that says, are you kidding me? You're going to do that? You? Have you seen who your friends are? Have you seen what you do on Friday nights? Do you know for a fact what your habits are? How much do you know about the deen? How much do you actually practice the religion? And all these thoughts that nobody else puts in our head, we put in our head. Does what? Destroys any motivation to take that one step forward. And I'm telling you guys, that's all that God requires from us, is 1 inch forward towards Him. He'll do the rest. He promises He'll do the rest. Just take that one step to Him, and He'll come running towards you. Anybody in this room who has experienced a little bit of an increasing in their spirituality, ask them, what did you do? I killed up old habits. I separated myself from people who were destroying me. And I took one crawl towards Allah, and He did the rest for me. But that one crawl, that 1 inch, that one movement sometimes could take a lifetime. Why? Because we've convinced ourselves that I'm no good. There's no way that God will look at me with the eyes of mercy and forgiveness. Impossible. And that's where we've defeated ourselves already. That's why everybody else has our attention, and we have a prescription for everybody else out there. When it comes to us, we've convinced ourselves, I'm not worthy of any change. At the age of 18, 21, 25, I've had young guys come to me and tell me that, Syed, I'm convinced that my akhirah will be nothing but the hellfire, so I have told myself to make this dunya heaven for myself. When those satanic thoughts enter your system, then what ends up happening is you've convinced yourself that all this talk about God's mercy and God's rahmah and God is rahim, He's rahman, He's ghafoor, is all these things, that's for everybody else. It's not for me. And that's the number one solution, is to look at yourself through the eyes of Allah. When the angels complained to God when he announced that I'm going to make a human being as my Khalifa on this earth. He will represent me. He will make me known to every other creation out there. He'll represent me. They complained to him. They cried to him, please don't make this insan. All he'll do is shed blood on this planet. All he'll do is corrupt. All he'll do is create injustice. And the very famous reply that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives the angels is Inni a'lamu ma la ta'lamun. I know about this insan what you don't know. Meaning at that very first discussion of the creation of you and I, when the angels were sitting there pleading with God, this man will destroy this earth. Don't make this insan. The very first existence to defend us was our Creator. We've convinced ourselves that we're not worthy of God's mercy. Now again, like I said last time during the Q&A, a lot of you will sit there and tell me, Said, you don't know my life. I don't have to know your life. What I do know is that when you have convinced yourself that your sin is bigger than God's mercy, when you've convinced yourself that you are so filthy and dirty that Allah, who's cleansed those who are worse than you, cannot cleanse you, now you're no longer taking yourself on, you're taking God on directly. Because he says what? He says there is nothing out there that's unforgivable except for shirk. When you equate and when you equal and when you put another God beside me, you worship us side by side, that's a sin that I cannot forgive. Everything else, provided you are sincere, there's potential. But you have to first have the mindset. You know, this philosophy of dua, the etiquette of supplication, it's a beautiful discussion. One day, someday we'll have it. Pages upon pages of traditions that are there on the etiquette of dua. It's a treasure the Ahl Bayt have left us that no other school of thought has, by the way. Nobody has the du'as that we have. One of the etiquettes that we have in terms of the answering of our du'as is to have certainty in what you're asking for. I know God, it's a long shot and I don't know if I deserve it. Probably not. I doubt you'll give it to me. But I'll ask anyways if it's okay. I know I'm wasting your time, but this is my dua. That's not certainty. The story that I've told before when I came to my first visit to Mashhad when I was in Iran. When I went to Iran in 2004, and before that I hadn't even flown outside of the country. Forget ziyarat and all that kind of stuff. So alhamdulillah, when the school had organized a trip for us to go to Mashhad, it was my first time going to any ziyarah. So of course the etiquette of it, I was worried about not fulfilling the proper etiquettes of ziyarat. I went to my teacher, I said, look, this is my first time going, what do I do? He said, look, when you go to Mashhad, and those of you who have been to Mashhad, you know that the way that they have planned and designed the city, the center of that city is the haram of Imam Rada alayhi salam. And all major roads go and lead it to the actual haram. There's actually an underground passage that takes you out of a different road on the other side of the haram. Good. He says from the airport to the haram is about a 15-20 minute drive, not very long. There'll come a time, he told me, that when you make a left or a right, you're on a major road, in front of you is that beautiful golden dome. And from any of the spots on the major roads, you can see this dome miles and miles away. You can't miss it. He says the moment that your eyes for the first time are laid on the dome of Imam Rada, asked for 3 du'as. And he said, if you're worried about being disrespectful to the Imam, you can only be disrespectful to the Imam when those 3 du'as are something that is materialistic, or something that is very small in nature. You want to ask the Imam? Ask big, man. Ask for things that you might think are impossible. Because he has that connection, that vertical connection to Allah that can make the impossible possible. But you have to have yaqeen in what you're asking for, certainty in what you're asking for. When we find ourselves on the musalla, on the prayer mat, and sometimes we have those moments, right guys? Where we are alone in the room, we are praying, where there's no rush going on, the phone's not going on, there's no game on, nothing. It is actually me and salat, and I have an extra 5 minutes after salat to sit there and think about what I just did. When we have those moments that seem to be very scarce nowadays, we actually stop and think about where I'm sitting, who I'm facing, and who I just worshipped. And those thoughts enter our head. And naturally what ends up happening is that we think about our deficiencies. We humble ourselves. We might even recall a few major mistakes that we've made in the past. And then we begin the process of begging Allah for forgiveness. Asking Allah to please cleanse my soul. Actually telling Allah what our innermost core is telling us. That look, I don't want to be this person that I am right now. Nobody in this room sins because they hate Allah, na'udhu billah. Nor do we sin because we love shaitan. We don't do that. We do it because for that moment, our desire gets the best of us. And then afterwards we regret. And sometimes when we sin so much, we have convinced ourselves that I am nothing but the embodiment of the sin that I continue to perform over and over and over again. Who asked you to give you that right to label yourself with that label? Because every single time that you do oppression against yourself and injustice against yourself, and that's exactly what we're doing. When we've convinced ourselves at the tender age of 18, 21, 25, that I'm not worthy of God's mercy, all we're doing by doing that is proving the angel's rights. That this person wasn't worth being created for. When the opposite happens, when we live a life of sin, and I'm talking about major sins, stuff that gets you in jail, but at the same time, inside the heart of our hearts, we actually start to make a U-turn and go back to God and sincerely ask Him for forgiveness and to cleanse my soul. What you're doing is you're proving God right in that conversation. That yes, my creation has the power to sin, but He also understands if anybody, any existence, has the ability to right His wrong, it's me. It's me. He doesn't knock on this person's door or that person's door or that person's door. He comes crawling to me. He falls in the sajda to me. He begs Allah he begs me for my mercy. That's why in the etiquette of dua, one of the things that is very important, my sisters especially, is persistence in your dua. They say to be persistent in your dua. We ask Allah, we have a dua, we wait about 4 or 5 days, nothing happens. It's okay. I didn't think that I would get it anyways. The hadith says no, be persistent, keep knocking on the door. You keep knocking, eventually someone's going to open the door, right? If nothing else, what you've proven to yourself is that I keep knocking on this door because I have the hope it's going to open one day for me. I also am persistent by telling myself there's no other door out there I want to knock on. I'll knock on this door my entire life. For that one moment where God opens that door and says, I've forgiven you. Because remember, God's forgiveness is not like ours. God's forgiveness is not like ours. We forgive, but oh man, we don't forget. It's stored in our hard drive. And every so often we want to remind you of what you did to me 20 years ago. I'll pop that stuff in your face any single day I want to. I'll remind you, if you mess up twice, this is number 2 now. But God, the hadith says that God forgives you as if the sin never occurred to begin with. It's like a sheet of white paper, right? A sheet of blank white paper, white crisp paper out of the packet. And you write a sentence in pencil that you shouldn't have written, and you erase that. You can erase that for half an hour. The pencil mark is gone, but someone could tell that there was something written on that paper. It's not quite brand new yet. That's how we forgive each other. The pencil's gone, the sentence is erased, but you can tell this paper has been used. When God forgives us, it's as if another crisp white piece of paper was taken out of that package. Why would you not want to tap into that system of forgiveness? Because the reality is that we believe that Adam was the first creation of God. He wasn't. He wasn't the first, guys. He was the best creation of God. Such that he would gather every existence out there and say, come, bow down to my creation. This is the representative of my greatest achievement as a Khaliq. He chose you and I to represent him on this planet. Why? What's it that says that he is not only ma'loom, but he's also alim as well, both. He wants to be the one who knows and wants to be the one who is known as well. And he chooses who? You and I. To introduce him to the others. To every existence out there. My sisters, the mothers in the audience, those who are about to give birth to children, those who have given birth to children, you ever stop and ask yourself that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to choose you as an avenue to make sure that his creation enters this world. The pains of pregnancy, the difficulty of pregnancy, we can't even pretend to know as men what they go through a single day, no idea. But sometimes in the back of their mind, they should remind themselves that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has seen me worthy enough to be an avenue, a vessel, a bridge from his creation and this world. And he's convinced himself that I am going to choose you as that vessel. Because I see something inside you that's worthy of that. All you have to do is for 9 months convince God that God, you made the right decision. I am worthy of this. How does God look at us? How do we look at ourselves? It's not like we are individuals who God has said that you need to be perfect. It's not about us being infallible. He never created us to be infallible. Our purpose was not, and our purpose is not, to be ma'soom. We don't have the ingredients of isma inside of us. What he does want from us is that when we do trip, when we do fall, when we stumble, when we sin, do we get up, dust ourselves off, and say, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, I'm very sorry for what I just did, and move on? Or do we convince ourselves that I am dirt, I belong on the ground, and this is where I will live my life? Doesn't matter what you've done. There's nothing in this world greater than your Allah. But by you convincing yourself that I am not worthy of this, you've convinced yourself that something is greater than God. And that's the biggest disrespect to your Creator. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
You know, oftentimes we believe that we are lower than angels. We have this perception that angels are the best creation out there. To give you some idea of who you are in the eyes of Allah, You know, if somebody is a great person, we think, oh, that person's an angel. And by saying that, we've told ourselves that this individual, or the status of being an angel, is higher than the human being. What we don't realize is sometimes through our own actions, we actually create angels. That's how high we are. I'll give you a few examples. They say that in hadith, it's supported by hadith, says that for 40 days, if you are to pray salat on time, on its appropriate time, for 40 straight days, all 5 salat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala assigns 2 angels to you whose sole purpose is to remind you when it's time for salat. When you get married and you purify yourself and you do ghusl afterwards, every drop of water that falls from your body, an angel is there to pray for your forgiveness. When we sit there on the musalla and we do tasbihat al-arba, subhanallah, walhamdulillahi, wa la ilaha illallah, wallahu akbar, we're on the ground doing it. And every single time we read that tasbih on the ground, there are angels doing tawaf of the arsh of Allah, reading that for us in the skies, in the heavens. We're doing that. Our deeds are creating these angels everywhere. So my point is very simple tonight to all of you. Those of you who know the way that I speak, I try to deliver a message of hope for myself first, and then to all of you. There's nothing worse sometimes than despair. Nothing worse than that. There's nothing worse than trying to fight your own demons. There's nothing worse than being afraid to contemplate. Because that's what happens sometimes. We are so worried about contemplation because we don't know what will pop into our mind. Literally, I ask you, try this exercise. Next time you commute to school or work, wherever you go, at least a half an hour, 45-minute drive, shut off the radio, turn everything off. Just you and your thoughts alone for the entire drive. Many people get scared at that process. 10 minutes in, they're looking for the radio. These thoughts scare me, man. I can't handle it. They're worried about what's going to happen. Why do we fear death? We fear death for many reasons, but one of them is what? It's a mulaqat with yourself. It's a meeting with yourself, nothing else. Here, you're a certain way, you can blame a lot of people, right? I'm this way, I'm horrible, I'm not a practicing Shia because of my parents, because of society, the ulama, the centers, the masajid, my friends, 1,001 excuses. In the grave, it's you and it's you, that's it. Nothing else. That's when all the maths, all the excuses, everything goes out the window. It's you and it's your book of deeds. And that scares us because we know what we've done inside of us. We know how we truly are. We can place a mask on our face to fool the world. You can't fool yourself in the mirror. But what's bigger than that realization is to realize that God is merciful. All He wants is that inch from you. And when you do it in the prime of your youth, when you're surrounded by shaitan, when you're surrounded by distraction upon distraction, when everything is pulling you off the path of Islam, and you're doing everything to stay in the path of Islam, God sees that. For you to be encircled by shaitan, in the middle He sees you doing sajda. There's nothing more beloved in the eyes of Allah, hadith says, than a young man who repents for his sins. And nothing more detested in the eyes of Allah than old people who habitually sin over and over and over again. Nothing is more beloved in the eyes of Allah than young, beautiful people like yourself to do sujood. When every emotion, every whisper, every element outside of you is pulling you towards it, you are pulling yourself towards Allah. Try it out once in a while. Ask Him for help. Beg Him for your forgiveness. Be sincere. Tell him, and he knows the state that you're in. You know, we have a problem, all of us do. We habitually sin over and over and over again. I don't believe that we sin or we commit every single sin out there. I do believe that we have a handful of sins that we habitually commit over and over and over again. I don't know if I discussed this in Zainab or not a couple years ago, but you know, this idea of desire versus habits. When you are 15 or 16 years old and you commit a sin, it's because your shahwa, your desire is very, very high. And the regret that you feel is this low afterwards. At 15 you think, oh, I'm a kid, I should be making mistakes. Everybody else out there at 15 also made the same mistakes I did. My parents did, my brothers did, my friends did, everyone else is doing it, I'm doing it also. And that regret is very low, doesn't last very long. The desire is very, very high. And you keep committing that one sin over and over and over again. Eventually they tend to even out. Eventually, as you get older in life, the regret increases, the desire dies away. Now you simply are committing that sin out of habit alone. While you're committing that sin, your conscience is screaming at you. Telling you, what are you doing, man? You're breaking God's laws. And the moment that you're done committing that sin, all you do is beat yourself up over it. The regret has skyrocketed through the roof. Why? Because you become a habitual sinner. Now you sit there and tell me what's the solution for that. I'll give you a very simple, it's not a simple solution, but it is a solution. Before that, we're saying, Muhammad, please.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
There's a theory one day that I had discussed with one of my teachers in a discussion on akhlaq, about this idea of the nafs and the soul and why we sin and how we sin. It's a theory, it may not apply to everybody, I don't know. It's a theory, and I'll paraphrase, of course. It's a theory of the fact that we convince ourselves that it's now my time. I don't know what happens here in Seattle, but in Toronto we have a little bit of a problem with trying to get our youth married. I'm sure it's a problem here as well. And specifically our sisters, who seem to be getting married at a very later stage in their life. My parents' generation, I'm sure some of the elders as well, usually a woman gets married at a very young age. And we have a problem in the sense that sometimes the sister goes into late 20s and even into her 30s and she's not married yet. And then of course, sometimes the ignorance of our community kicks in and they stop and they wonder, I wonder what's wrong with this girl that she's not married yet. Something must be wrong with her, otherwise she would have been married by now. And so you don't have any information, there's no real facts, you just assume there's got to be something wrong with her, so I'm not going to even try to engage this process. And sometimes our sisters who mashallah are muhajjabah, who are very staunch in their hijab, are also caught up in this idea. In fact, we have, it's a different topic, but sometimes we have these guys out there who don't wish to marry sisters who wear hijab. I don't want sisters who are that religious, they would say. I don't know what that religious means, but and so what ends up happening is this, I'm not saying everyone does this, is that 25, 27, 29, 28, 29 now, the girl is a little bit worried, the girl's mother is freaking out as well. Everybody around her is married, her sister is married, who's 5 years younger, her friends are married, and her one daughter, who is a proper hijabi, mashallah, is at home waiting for the phone to ring. And the phone has stopped ringing for many, many years. So what ends up happening is the hijab comes off. And they've convinced themselves that the one barrier that is stopping my daughter or me from getting married is this scarf on my head. And so what do? You take off the hijab, you change your look and image, a couple of selfies later, you wait for the phone to ring. And the phone will ring. Because there are some shallow guys out there who all they care about is what's on the outside. And why you would want to attract that kind of filth is beyond me, but it's been done. Literally, hijab goes off within a year, married, reception, everything. And the sister sits there, and when you ask her what happened, she'll sit there and say, you know what? It was my time now to be happy. Everybody around me got what they wanted. You know, their Prince Charming came on a white horse and took them away. My younger sister got a beautiful wedding. My friends now have kids. I'm not even married yet. Now it's my time. And when that my time happens, everything goes out the window. It's all fair game at that moment. The Sharia becomes secondary, everything becomes secondary. I worry about my time. When will it become my time to be happy? And so when it comes to my time, everything is sacrificed. As guys, we're no different. If you try to live a pious life, if you said no to every peer pressure out there, through high school, to university, this and that, sometimes, you know, it's quite amazing for me that sometimes young people will go through the most difficult stages in their life, high school, university, college, and maintain their piety. After that, the most difficult time is when they lose their piety. I just don't get it sometimes. It would make sense if you jumped, it wouldn't make sense, but it would be a little bit understandable if during high school and college, when those emotions are raw and strong, you jump off the path. But after all of that, when you're able to ward off the satanic desire, now that you're in your late 20s, where you should have a grip on your shahwa, you've given up the fight at that moment. Why? It's my time, Syed. I saw my boys have a great time on Friday nights. Club hopping from here to here, getting high on Friday nights, all this kind of stuff. They loved it. They would ask me, I would say no, like a good little boy. I went home. And now I'm sick and tired. It's gotten me nowhere. It's my time now. And when my time happens, it's over. That's it. Every principle, every value that you have kept inside of you through high school and through college is all out the window. Because this society will preach to you about the individual. The individual. Mind your own business. To each his own. This is your time now to be happy. Make your nafs your God. You want to enslave yourself to somebody? Enslave yourself to your own self, to your own desires. Where have you gotten by fighting off these desires? Where have you gotten by warding off shaitan? Where have you gotten by listening to your Allah? Look at these guys, man. They're having a blast right now. And you're sitting there watching Jimmy Fallon at home. It becomes what? It becomes my time. That my time is a tool of shaitan. You get revved up, you get angry, and you wash away your values. Be careful of that. Remember, Amir al-Mu'mineen says, the sweetness of this world is the sourness of the next. And the sourness of this world is the sweetness of the next. You know, we become masters at investments. We know if I put X amount of dollars down now, 20 years from now, 30 years from now, my return on investment will be this amount. We have that stuff like clockwork inside of our brains. But when it comes to investing in our akhirat, we become a little bit tongue-tied for some reason. Because we live in a world of instant gratification. And Islam is a system of deferred gratification. You'll get to your results in this world, but nothing compares to what awaits for you in the hereafter if you just eliminate my time and replace it with God's time. Is there hear about the marshmallow experiment? Anybody? The marshmallow experiment by Stanford University in California? Good story. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Stanford picked up a couple of kids, put them in a room. Oh, now you know all of a sudden. Oh yeah, that one. Haven't even started yet, anyways. Small little kids, one kid at a time. They would put them on a table, and they would put one marshmallow in front of them. And they would tell the child that, look, you can either eat this marshmallow now, or you can wait. I'm going to leave the room after 15 minutes only. I'm going to return back. If that marshmallow still is sitting on the table, I'll give you 2 marshmallows. They will leave the room. You should see this experiment. One kid would hide under the table. One kid would close his eyes. One kid would close his ears. You see kids pacing like they're going through some treacherous issue. One kid within 10 seconds, you see the marshmallows out of his mouth. And the case was about instant gratification versus deferred gratification. They have numbers, of course, that tell us what percentage ate the marshmallow, waited. There were some people actually waited. Later on, they would tell us that those who deferred their gratification will go on to be more successfully sound individuals. When you know you have something greater waiting for you, it doesn't make sense to defer or to sacrifice that for the quick solution now. But that's what the effect of this society is. Everything is instant, guys. And everybody around us is instant. And now if you're trying to live a life of deferred, it doesn't make sense to anybody around you. Eventually you convince yourself, forget deferred, I want mine now. And that's sometimes why we sin over and over and over again. To the point where we sit and we beat ourselves up over it. My message tonight is very simple, and my final speech to all of you is very simple. It is a message of hope, as it is usually. It's a message of you now changing the lens on your glasses to look at yourself through God's lens. Know that He defended you. Know that He created you to represent Him on this earth. Know that He has plans for all of you. Know that He sees you not as somebody who has to be infallible, but as somebody who goes back to Him when they mess up. You know, our parents sometimes, if we end up in big trouble and we don't tell them, and the trouble gets bigger and bigger and bigger until we finally go back to our parents and say, look, Mom, Dad, you should know that I'm in this much trouble. The first thing they'll tell you is, why didn't you come to me in the very beginning? If you first came to me, I would have solved your problem from day number 1. Now you've allowed this monstering beast to get this big, and now to handle it will require more of our energy. God is no different. We're bound to stumble, we're bound to sin, we're bound to fall. And I'm not condoning sinning. Don't get me wrong, I'm not giving you an open invitation to sin. I'm not talking about what you do when you sin. I'm saying, what do you do after you sin? Do you immediately go to God and say, God, I have this regret that's killing me. I want you to remove it from me. Nothing is greater than God, guys. Nothing is greater than God. Not your warped sense of who you are, nor your mistake or sin. And we have individuals in history that have come to the Prophet and confessed major sins. And the Prophet has always told them to have hope in God's mercy. That's my message tonight. The fundamental problem that we have is not from anybody else outside of us. It is how we view ourselves. Imam Ali calls us a grand universe. Don't think that you've been created out of vain. Don't think that you are some normal, ordinary creation. Absolutely not. You, inside of you, is an alim akbar, a grand universe. The sickness inside of you, the cure inside of you. You just need to perceive, understand, look inside of you. Every solution to every problem you have is inside of you. Just take that inch towards Allah. Watch how doors open, guys. I'll guarantee you, you take that step sincerely, and stuff that you thought was impossible, all of a sudden becomes possible. Because that's who God is with sincerity. He makes the impossible possible. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to accept this qaleel ibadat, inshaAllah. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, in this month of Rajab and Sha'aban, that you allow us the inspiration to prepare ourselves for the month where we are the guests of Allah. We ask you, Allah, to forgive our sins, the sins of our parents, the sins of our elders, inshallah. We ask you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there's so much tyranny, injustice, bloodshed all over the world, in Yemen, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Iraq, Bahrain. Wherever you see individuals who are in need, we ask you, Allah, to weaken the hands of the enemies of Islam, strengthen the mustaza'afin all over the world, and finally, Allah, the ultimate solution that we see to all of these problems is the coming of our 12th Imam. We await him with this eagerness. Allah, allow us to witness the zuhur of our Imam in this lifetime of ours, and allow us to be beside him when he comes, inshallah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.